This episode of Bonfireside Chat is brought to you by the Diggity Duck Bundle. What is the Diggity Duck Bundle? Well, it is a charity bundle we put together. Cole and I and everybody on the network, upset about the state of the world and looking for ways to make real change, have recorded one episode of every show on the network. And we put this in a bundle. You can buy this bundle for $10 and up. We encourage you to give more if you're able to, but $10 is the minimum. It is 10 hours of stuff, so it's $1 an hour, and it contains an episode of everything. So not only is it a good way to help a great cause, all money from that goes to charity. That goes split three ways down the middle to the ACLU, CARE, CAIR, which is an immigration and immigrant support charity, and the National Domestic Violence Hotline. So we want to do this to, again, to kind of fight back against the dying of the night, and you get cool stuff. So there is the episode of Bonfireside Chat. In it is talking to Jim Crawford of Frog Fractions 2, talking to him about his history with Souls of Darkness. He included a Souls of Darkness LCD game in Frog Fractions 2, and we talked to him about that. But each show on the network gets a representation, and they're significant. They're actual real life episodes of the show. So check it out. Go to Duckfeed.tv /store. And thanks for helping us. Thanks for helping us do what we can. Again to fight back.
Some of our landings were desperate adventures. We are now prepared to meet the inevitable counterattacks with power and with confidence.
My name is Gary Butterfield.
My name is Kole Ross.
And you're listening to Bonfireside Chat. It is a salty favorite.
And this week, we are beginning our coverage of Salt and Sanctuary, a Souls-like game developed by Ska Studios in 2016. So last year, around the time that Dark Souls 3 came out for the PS4, and then eventually on the PC. You can get this on Steam.
Yes, yeah, which you couldn't at the time.
Right.
So I played this on PS4, but it is available on Steam as well.
Yeah.
Scott Studios is just two people. This is James and Michelle Silva. They've done a couple other games as well.
Yeah, Dishwasher Samurai, something like that.
Dishwasher Samurai is the most famous one. There are a couple Easter eggs for that in here. I didn't realize it, but I had played a game by these guys really early on, and when I first downloaded games for Xbox, which was I Made a Game with Zombies in it.
Oh yeah, I played that.
That's these guys. So this is an attempt to bring kind of soul-style play to a 2D platformer. And it is really, really like Souls with the numbers filed off kind of thing. As much so, I would say, as Lords of the Fallen.
Yeah.
Other than the fact that it has that different perspective, which makes a big difference for good and ill, which we'll talk about the ways that the game benefits from that and detriments from it. Mm-hmm. But it is really, really Souls, down to trying to capture like the feeling of like lore and atmosphere and everything. Like it is a very, very, very intense homage.
Yeah.
To Souls.
So all of those times that we've ever said, oh, that's kind of like Souls, we have been kind of inflating that grade. No, this is very much like Souls. And yes, we're going to be drawing an awful lot of parallels, especially here in the generalities, just to let you know how it maps from one to the other. Yeah,
because the way that this game, again, like the way it succeeds and fails in it changing from a 3D to a 2D game, also is in how it compares to its clear inspiration.
Right.
To kind of its source material, for lack of a better word.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And it was also inspired by the nonlinear Castlevania games. Since you are exploring these kind of interconnected areas, you are getting movement skills that let you do kind of more intricate platforming and kind of get past these ability gates that are popping up here. So, there are many comparisons to be made between Dark Souls and Castlevania. This is marrying the two even further.
Well, and the comparisons between Dark Souls and Castlevania are Dark Souls and Castlevania 1 through 3.
Yes.
This is Dark Souls plus Symphony of the Night onward, like Igavania kind of thing. So it's Dark Souls as if it were married through a different kind of Castlevania.
Yes.
And you can listen to the recent Watch Out for Fireballs episode on Symphony of the Night to hear us kind of talk about the differences between those two things a little bit more.
People in the Watch Out for Fireballs Slack were talking about a new, I guess, like people are trying to find new words for this, and I guess a new one is Castleroid, which sounds terrible.
I think that they were joking.
Oh,
I don't
okay.
know if that's. I think that, in fact, I think that we may have made that joke in that episode, Cole. Then they were bringing that up.
Am
I think
Fox Newsing myself?
I think you might be Fox Newsing yourself, my friend.
People are saying.
Yeah. I think that is a joke.
Okay.
Because I mean, if people are honestly trying to find a new name for Metroidvania, I don't really understand why. Like it's fine. Everyone knows what you mean.
Yep.
Language is descriptive, not prescriptive.
Yeah. Call of Duty is a Doom clone.
Yeah, there we go. It's all Doom clones, and this is a Souls-like.
Yes.
So we've got those movement mechanics that kind of add this platforming. The combat feels close to like kind of 1-to-1 Souls.
Yeah.
In that it is slow and kind of methodical. It is highly stamina based. There is a parry. There is a block that takes a certain amount of stamina. Things like that. This also runs into some rough edges in the translation to 2D, which we'll talk about.
Yeah.
But it is clearly an attempt to take the same kind of Souls combat and make it this. There's a little bit more nuance to it. There are kind of combos. The ability to jump makes a difference.
Yes, it does.
In combat, but it's pretty much Dark Souls combat from the side.
Definitely. And it is the most Soulsy when you're fighting a kind of large enemy, on the same level as you. Where it kind of breaks down is when you're fighting lots of small enemies that are far more mobile than your character is designed to be.
Flying enemies in this game are a war crime. And and big enemies you can't roll through also suck.
Yeah.
I think
you can roll through big enemies. It depends on your equipment weight, but there are enemies that are so big that you cannot roll through them.
Well, or they just happen to be at the edge of the screen, which becomes a problem with bosses.
Yes.
Which we'll talk about in kind of the polished subheading of this.
If you die, your salt is collected by whatever killed you. Your salt being the Souls analog for this, kind of powering that enemy up, making it again this game of horse. Like any number of Souls-likes do. Or if you die to an environmental hazard, if nothing takes your life, then it turns into a poisonous salt bat that you have to kill.
Yes. Yeah. And just the standard Bonfire Side Chat disclaimer, if we say souls instead of salt, if we say bonfire instead of shrine, you will forgive us.
Yep.
We
are saying lowercase b bonfire.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So as we mentioned, stamina is really a big deal. Your jump actually counts against it. So more of your mobility, you have more mobility verbs to use that resource for. You have that strong and weak attack. And there are combos and air attacks that are kind of significant in this game. There's a lot more of, which kind of makes this a weird bridge of Souls-liking to Neo, in that there's these kind of combos.
Yes.
And then the way that they get around the fact that in Dark Souls, like you just kind of run past things, is that your dodge roll will move through enemies on this 2D plane. Like you will actually just kind of morph through them.
Yes.
This doesn't always work.
No,
but that is the idea. Yeah, and that's a downfall for this game, I think. That gets frustrating to me.
Really, it does. And oftentimes, again, when you're dealing with several small enemies, rolling past the first couple will just get you in between them, and then all of a sudden you're being Night at the Roxburied, humped from both sides as you're just kind of caught in a stun loop until you die. That accounted, outside of the bosses, that accounted for most of my deaths. Actually, was getting wedged in between smaller enemies just because I didn't realize I was fat rolling at the time or something like that, and just not gauging it properly.
Yeah, I definitely died to that. I wouldn't say it's most of my deaths, but I died to that quite a bit.
Yeah.
Because and I don't know how many times this has come up, but in Dark Souls, the fact that once you get to a boss, if you don't want to fight all the enemies on the way there, you can run past them. That's a feature, not a bug.
Right.
That's not something to be prevented through game design. That's something I think is mandatory to the Dark Souls kind of enjoyment loop.
Mhm.
And every time we've done a game or a Souls-like that tries to interfere with that, we kind of run into problems.
Yeah. Like, wait, no, play our game, please don't run past it.
You have to give me the option to do that.
Yeah.
And because I might end up doing this 10 times.
Right.
And that becomes a problem in this game.
Yeah.
Some boss runs are actually, most of the boss runs are actually pretty charitable.
They're pretty generous with the smaller shrines, actually.
Yeah.
That are usually somewhat hidden and off to the side, but just put a couple of enemies between you and the boss.
But the frustrating thing about those is that one of the kind of rapid prototyping aspects of Souls bosses and Souls-like bosses is the idea of trying new things, which might mean different loadouts, which might mean that you want to have a real shrine with your full resources.
Right.
There. So like these little mini shrines that give you the easy run up I don't really actually know why those exist in this game. I don't know why you wouldn't just give the power of full shrines to shrines.
Yeah.
It's like they only had a limited number of them. So it's a kindness, but at the same time, there were several times where I'd be making a boss run from a small shrine, be like, man, I would really like to buy this elemental effect for my weapon. Can't do, from that small shrine, and end up having to do like a larger backtrack that, I would not have had to have done with just a regular all bonfires are equal.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
Those elemental effects that you can apply, the equivalent of resins in this game, are incredibly important, just because there are oftentimes elemental weaknesses for these bosses that are not effectively signaled outside of either the bestiary or the wiki.
Yes. Yeah. This is a wiki in hand kind of game, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
A lot of the elemental weaknesses, I don't think logically read from looking at a boss.
Right. And those resins are just kind of a blanket. That is the just use a kukri kind of thing. Like, oh, this will be really, really easy as long as you have X number of this item.
Yeah, yeah. And even then, like, it doesn't obviate many of the fights. Like,
right.
The bosses here are fairly tanky in general, I think. There are exceptions, and there are also builds where that's not the case. Like, I understand people can speedrun this with magic and do it in, an hour. But if you're just kind of playing through a normal playthrough, the game, these enemies do have a lot of hit points. So getting that little extra damage doesn't totally make it a joke, but it does make it's a big help.
Yeah.
So knowing those things, and for me, when I played this, that was my first, like, if I died to a boss, I'm like, this guy's not taking enough damage. Try to see if I could figure out what his weakness was by thinking about him. If I couldn't do that, just look up on the wiki what his weakness is.
Yeah.
Which is just less tedious than just trying a series of successive resins until one of them does a little bit more damage.
Right. Yeah. It helps that you can see the damage that you're doing as well.
Like,
that is a kindness.
Yeah.
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 What's not a kindness is, boy, oh boy, am I tired of knockback and stunning.
The knockback in this game is really weird because, again, in Souls, it is incredibly intentional when that's going to be a big deal. Right? Like, there are a couple of areas like Blight Town, Upper Rafters, things like that, where it's like, okay, if I get knocked backwards or anything like that, I have to be really careful about my footing. This game, you spend a lot of time on the ground. You also spend a lot of time up on platforms and stuff, though. It's a platformer. So the knockback feels more akin to a Castlevania.
Yeah.
Which, when an enemy takes, you have to engage with an enemy, it's not just a couple hits like it would be in Castlevania. It can be, less than optimal, I think.
Right. Yeah. And, again, it just feels like, for me, it felt like it got me into a lot of loops that I didn't feel like I had a lot of chance to get out of. Yeah. But, these games find your weakness, right?
Yeah.
Similar to Dark Souls, you can actually carry a shield. And also similar to Symphony of the Night, weirdly enough. And this ends up being really, really helpful early in the game. I wasn't sure if that was a function of the way the enemies operated there, or if it was just a matter of growing my confidence of going around and navigating and fighting in this perspective. But knowing when to use your shield and manage your stamina that way ended up being the difference between life and death for a lot of bosses.
It's also, they introduce very early on enemies doing kind of ranged combat to you.
Yeah.
While you are fighting close-up enemies. And that's something that Dark Souls does, but it kind of never really lets up.
Right.
Insult. So I found that to be the most useful kind of use for blocking. Even though when I played through this, did my full playthrough of it, I barely ever used a shield.
Yeah.
I usually would, try to dodge and stuff. And when I played through it my second time, which I didn't end up finishing, spoiler, I blocked more.
Yeah.
The pairing window is pretty easy, actually, in this game. It's pretty broad, I find. Maybe that's a trick of perspective. Maybe it's actually a wider window. You can parry in this game, and it's very useful. You do less damage in a riposte than you do in Souls, but it's a little bit easier to pull off. And they actually, I think one of the things this game does well is set up an enemy fairly early on that is designed to kind of teach you this.
Yes.
And that's a recurring enemy. You'll run into him again and again. This is the Black Knight equivalent in this game. But it is actually very useful to parry. So even if you are gun shy about parrying in Dark Souls, if you're going to play through Salt, I recommend giving it a shot.
Yeah. And the way it's set up, you can do it even without a shield. Like even if you are blocking with a two-handed item. I ended up actually doing this accidentally a lot. I feel like a real doofus. Like, I just Mr. Magoo my way into these mechanics. But no, like it is relatively easy to deploy. It doesn't require a lot of timing. It just requires you to attack out of a block.
Yes.
At the right time.
And that's something, again, in Souls, like sometimes you can parry with a weapon. Here you can parry with weapons in general. Another mechanic that they have that's kind of an added mechanic here is, so you have these three stats. You have health, stamina, and focus, which is essentially your mana. And health and stamina and focus, actually, their maximum will go down as you use them. So I just want to grab this note from you because it says subject to constant degradation. So it's not like they just drain.
Right.
It's as you get hit, they go down. So your maximum health goes down as you get hit. This is called wounding or fatigue. And you can obviate this with rings and the like, but it kind of just, the longer you spend between bonfires, the less health you have to work with, kind of no matter how many healing items you have. And this kind of makes sense. This kind of takes Dark Souls 2's health system. In there are health crystals, so you can kind of obviate health if you didn't have a maximum that was going down. Right.
Yeah. So this is, again, just a way to make sure that you are resting, and to also kind of add a little bit more. This played in most with the bosses. One boss in particular, but any of the larger, more tanky, kind of more damage spongy bosses ended up kind of being a race between how quickly I could do damage to them and how quickly my wounding would stack up. Yeah.
I don't hate this mechanic. I don't think it adds too much.
Yeah.
Like, I don't feel great about it. Yeah. I'm not like, oh man, this is awesome. This adds tons of tension and coolness. Like, it's fine. It didn't get in the way. Right. But I don't love it.
Yeah. There is a good deal of build variety in the game, which is nice. The way that you level up, you do kind of get locked into something. I could see picking the game up again and then going for like a magic build, which I didn't really play with at all, or focusing on some of the more dex-based weapons. Like, all of those appear to be viable. I've seen videos of them as they go along. And they're available to you because you have, these different kinds of armor, several different weapon classes, and more rings than Steven Tyler, and also more charms than Johnny Depp.
Yeah, and we will talk about charms in a second, because that's a new kind of mechanic that I think is actually kind of neat. Yeah. So I this will be my time when I disclose this. I played this when it came out to completion. Attempted to replay it for the show this time, and I don't like this game that much, so I didn't finish it. So if anybody wants to, make me turn in my half of the amulet for that, I will. But I just wasn't having fun, and I'm like, well, life is short.
Yeah.
On that second run through, I did 3 run-ups to it. I started with a magic build.
Okay.
And I found magic to be really, really underpowered, at least in the early game. It's supposed to get pretty OP. There's a way to make it OP early by taking like the Amber Idol as your gift. Right. And you kind of craft yourself a Drake sword, essentially, that you can use for a while. I didn't do that, so it was very hard. And then attempted like the Hunter, like Dex kind of ranged combat build, and also had a really hard time with just specific enemies that were not dying fast enough.
Yeah. That's always the problem with those.
Kind of the poise and, enemies I couldn't stun by hitting them. I would hit them and they would just continue moving forward, move through me from like a 45-degree angle up because it's a 3D, because they can come from any angle. And that ended up being too frustrating. So when I tried again for the third time and got the furthest, I just went back to a strength build, which was by far the easiest.
Yes.
So like it does respect build variety. A strength build is still kind of easy mode.
Right.
And some of that variety is really obviated by the way that you level up in this game. Mm-hmm. Because since they are on these different, it's clearly inspired by the sphere grid from Final Fantasy X. Right. And it is a linear path. So what I wanted to make something that I consider to be very simple and would have taken insane stat investment, which is somebody who used light armor but a heavy weapon. That's what I do for a lot of Dark Souls builds. Like I want a fast roll, but I want to use a gigantic fuck off weapon and kind of make a glass cannon. That's really hard to do in Salt because the light armor proficiencies are way on the other side of the board from the heavy weapon proficiencies. And it's one of the many areas of this game I think that looks neat initially, but actually kind of falls down is the way that you level up. I don't see the reason why you are shunted into these kind of classes through this thing. I think it gives you kind of less choice and variety in your build than you otherwise would have.
Yeah. Because what you're doing is you're spending these black pearls that you get by turning in your salt at the sanctuaries and using those to kind of place them on this grid to build out. You can kind of see at the periphery, you have these brass rings that you're going to be going for the highest classes of particular weapon types. Down in the magic, you have all of the different kind of, I forget what they call them here, but just the spells that you can go for.
Yes.
And you are kind of slotting these black pearls in nodes that kind of just stat you up in particular stats. Sorry, I'm speaking in circles.
No, it's okay. Stat you up in stats.
Stat you up in stats. And you do that to build up to these kind of bigger nodes that will give you the particular abilities. This is as opposed to the more free floating, like, hey, you just have a stat point to put in, and that is going to just unlock particular weapons or skills as you go along as you meet the requirements.
It should be like on both those times you said abilities and skills.
Yeah.
It should be noted that that's not like new verbs unless you're a caster.
Right.
So those abilities you're going towards, unless you're a caster, you're just moving towards proficiencies in armor weapons. Mm-hmm. And this is also something that I think this really falls down is that you get one of those things. They give you a stat bonus when you pick up like level 2 greatswords or whatever. Mm-hmm. You can get that stat way before you ever find a level 2 greatsword.
Yeah.
Like hours before. This whole thing I think is really inelegant. The way that this skill tree works with how loot is laid out in the game do not complement one another. And I don't see the reason for shunting you into those kind of paths, those branches like that, what the game gains by that. Yeah. Like it is a pretty presentation that looks neat on the surface, but is actually literally just you choosing stats. Like it's kind of boring.
Yeah.
It just looks neat.
Yeah.
And it suggests a complexity and kind of a freedom that isn't really there.
Yeah. Particularly for the weapon skills, what that is doing is simplifying stat requirements. So instead of saying, hey, you need to have 14 dex to use this weapon, what it'll say is, oh, this is a class 2 sword. You need to have leveled up far enough to get to, the class 2 swords for this. And on the strength side of things, like those skills will say, okay, now you can one-hand class 3 swords, but you can two-hand class 2 swords.
Yes.
Like this is an incredibly complex way to get around the way that certain weapons are gated away from you by your stats.
And that's would be fine if it was presented in a freer kind of form. Like this is also how they gate how many Estus you can have.
Yes.
Is also through this board because they want to space those out, and make it a thing you can prioritize, which is fine. But just the fact that making a heavy weapons light armor, who could wear better light armor than class 1, was so difficult was really frustrating to me. Or like if I wanted to have a crossbow and a gigantic sword, like what's so weird about, why should that require like a multi-class investment in this kind of game? It's just not very free. So there is a great variety, but it requires such huge investment to do anything that doesn't just kind of shunt into heavy weapons fighter, light weapons fighter, faith caster, magic caster.
Yeah.
Those are really the 4 kind of ways it wants you to go.
Yeah. And your starting class mostly determines the gear that you begin with, which can be important, and also which part of the board you start on, much like the sphere grid itself.
Yeah. You have 1 to 2 skills already chosen, depending on your class. So I think this is a missed opportunity.
Yeah.
For something that like legitimately could be kind of cool, but ends up being kind of having less depth than initially it looks like it has.
Yeah.
As we mentioned, you level at sanctuaries. We'll talk about sanctuaries for a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
These are your bonfires, but they're kind of bonfires plus. This is one of the cool things about this game. I really like the way this works.
Yeah.
Because you kind of create like little mini medulas.
The mini medulas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mini medulas.
Just look at it. It's in a snow globe.
Yeah.
Except instead of snow, it's ash.
Boy, I would love a little medula snow globe.
To Etsy.
They should sell that. Yeah, that would be fantastic. Be really cute.
I wonder how you make a snow globe.
And you turn it like a music box, and it plays the little like chime, like it plays the theme.
Oh shit!
That'd be phenomenal.
Okay, well,
no, but instead we're too busy with shirts that say, "I don't need sex. I get fucked by Dark Souls every day." So from
is that a serious shirt?
Yeah, man.
Oh god.
I don't think it's official. I don't think it's actually from Dark Souls or like from or Namco. I think it's it's a knockoff shirt. But that is a shirt that I have seen in this year.
Yeah, in this fucking nightmare planet that we live on. Yeah.
But I mean, I could just, and we talked about like little stuffed versions of the little lava bugs from 2-2. Like we could make much better merch if like From or Namco would hire us.
Hey,
like Dark Souls fans do not want shirts that talk about how hard Dark Souls is. They want cool, cute little references and Majula snow globes. They want snow globes from the least popular game in the series.
Gary,
listen to us.
Gary, I think it's just that we're lame.
I think it's that we're cool and they're lame, Cole.
Okay, all right.
I like the. I don't think that we're in that.
No, that reality feels better, so I will live in it. That's fine.
I don't think that there's an objective truth that wearing a shirt that says "I don't need sex, I get fucked by Dark Souls every day" is somehow cooler than literally anything. Like that's the bottom of cool.
I guess what I'm saying is like when we're making the pitch, do not lead with snow globes.
Okay.
The noted collectible of virgins and shut-ins.
This generation, all the kids are talking about snow globes.
Because it's how they smuggle Molly. That's a powder, right?
They very well could. I will lead with the stuffed animal lava bugs though.
Okay.
Because I think that's gold, and even just a little stuffed Sigurd would be great.
Oh yeah.
More plush.
Sigurd.
You
mean Sigmire?
Do. Yeah. Okay. I know. I'm so tempted to ask you to put in a marker, but I'm not going to do it because it's silly. But I'm so tempted to actually edit that out.
I would have forgotten it.
If being so to be totally fair, I have a Google window where I was looking at Dark Souls shirts or looking at did an image search, and somebody drew a picture of Sigurd with a shirt. And it has Sigurd, so I was looking at I was reading the word and said it out loud. It was one of those things.
Yeah. You Kaiser Soze'd yourself.
I Kaiser Soze'd myself.
Yeah.
But Sigmire is what I want, a stuffed version of, and I would know.
Well, there's
people
no difference.
Think I wouldn't know which one. Well, no. I would know, and I would rip the head off of that Sigurd towel.
Oh man.
I would wipe my boot with it. That's right. I don't want to get shit on my toy. That's gross.
Right. Yeah. No, just get those dead leaves off of there. Yeah. It's this sounds like something Fangamer would do, honestly.
Yeah, but just Fangamer's doing better work than Namco as far as marketing.
Of course.
Even that, I got that little cute hunter doll. They made a cute little Bloodborne guy. Have you seen that?
Yeah, I saw that. It was I have no place for stuff, so
he's real cute.
Yeah. No, I'm did you get him? Is it good?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. That's high quality and cute.
I'm happy that you like it.
Let's talk more about sanctuaries here.
Yes. So the sanctuaries, you can roll up. Some of them are not assigned any particular creed. These are like your covenants. And you can place your icon down. Sanctuaries that are of your creed allow you to kind of make these offerings of stone idols in order to kind of like basically provide yourself with amenities, including like merchants or upgrade stations, blacksmiths, all the way up to like fast travel.
Yes. Yeah. You populate them.
Yeah.
And it's kind of neat. We mentioned creeds, and we kind of call them covenants, but they're more than covenants. And this, you can do a lot more kind of with them. This is actually one of the few areas of this game I think is kind of an unqualified success.
Yeah.
I think creeds and sanctuaries are pretty neat. So, you populate your little town, and you join creeds here, which are the religions in this world. And they do a couple things. They determine your loadout. Like your Estus can kind of have some little quirks, how it works. Your Estus is dependent on your creed. You can get different things sold by merchants of that creed, different kinds of things fashioned by the blacksmiths of that creed. And then kind of most importantly is you can do work for that creed, which this part I don't like because it's
it's just fetch quest kind of stuff.
It's just fetch quest bullshit. But enemies drop vendor trash. If you turn in certain numbers of that, you can have items that kind of respawn Momodora style. Yeah. So you can say, like, every time I rest at the sanctuary, I'm going to get 3 fire resins. And you'll always have that because you did this like work for the creed. I'll be deep in the fucking cold ground before I go farm something like this.
But if you check it and see that
yeah. So I'm never going to grind up devotion in this thing. But if you check it, just naturally, you're probably going to get a couple ranks in this, and you can get a couple bonuses.
Yeah, and that upgrades your merchants, upgrades your blacksmiths, just makes life a little bit easier for you by increasing your possibility space from a particular shrine.
Yeah. The creeds roughly map onto different kinds of builds or playstyles.
Right.
And there are only 3 available from the beginning of the game. Then you get 1 about an hour and a half in, and then the rest are like super hidden at the end of the game.
Right.
I don't know why. But the and one of the ones that's really hidden at the end of the game is the caster one. So that seems like a real fuck you to me. I have no idea why there isn't a caster creed available right from the top. But they roughly map on a different play style. So like things like this is the ranged combat kind of decks. These are the heavy weapons guys. This is the faith. I guess you do get a faith covenant right away. You don't get a mage covenant right away. And then the hidden ones are kind of, other than the magic one, are kind of different. The evil one is hidden, and a weird money-based one is hidden.
Yes, the cult of the splendor or something like that. Yeah. Like those guys. Like those guys a lot. But yeah, like this is great, and you have a little weapon that will cleanse another shrine of a different creed. So you don't join them, you just kind of take it over and set it up. I was a member of the Iron Ones, I think is the name of it, and so the background of my shrine was just decorated with iron thrones all the time.
Yeah, it actually changes things visually as well. It's kind of a nice touch.
Yeah.
A little pro tip: there are idols that let you guides, which allow you to teleport. So if you just build up 1 Majula, you can always teleport back to it for free if you put guides in places. I think that like actually ties into a larger problem with the world structure of this game. In that I think that similar to Dark Souls 2, it's possible that the ease of teleporting you can do was added in later. Because there are a lot of shortcuts in this game that are pointless as fuck. It's doing this thing that Dark Souls 2 does, and we saw a little bit in Bloodborne, where it's trading on the kind of good feeling you get from a shortcut with no reason to ever use it. Right.
Nobody is ever going to go from Hager's Cavern to the Sunken Keep.
In a million years.
Right.
Like, why would you ever use that thing? And they almost always go backwards. Not always, but almost always go backwards. So there's not like a sequence breaking aspect to them either. You don't go. Sometimes they will go forward, but then you just run into a locked gate that's locked from the other side. Yeah. So there's not a lot of point to the way this is an interconnected world. It can feel kind of neat again when you find this. Oh, this opens back up into here. But if you have no reason to ever revisit there,
and when revisiting there is as easy as going to a guide and then getting to a sanctuary that's there.
Yeah, if you ever need to, you can just teleport there.
Yeah.
But you probably never need to. Unless you're like, if you're playing very completionist, like you might want to go back, but it's like fairly linear for kind of a Metroidvania.
Yeah.
There are a couple of branching paths, but for the most part, it's pretty straightforward. Yeah. And I think this game may have been better off with a like stage structure, like an Order of Ecclesia kind of thing.
Yeah, especially over at the over on the east side, the right side of the map, where you have a place like the Red Hall of Cages or the Ruined Temple, where most of the things that you're unlocking are just direct through lines that let you cross over. for one to the other in a very direct kind of way, it definitely belies a design that was not made with teleportation in mind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, but that is kind of like one of the biggest pro tips I can offer for the game is do not be stingy with your stone guides. There's one in almost every area, and there might be enough, I think, for pretty much every shrine in the game, at least all the ones that are unclaimed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
So go for it. Like we said, your Estus replacement changes depending on the creed of the sanctuary that you last rested at. I wasn't aware of any kind of mechanical difference, or I couldn't observe any because I was in, the mountain ones or whatever. I was mostly rolling around with a roll on my belt.
Yeah, they just eat bread, which is pretty charming. I like that a little bit. It's not like a fancy thing.
Yeah.
They do make a difference. But you're not really encouraged to switch covenants if you are fine with any of those opening 3. Mm-hmm. Because there is a sin mechanic from switching them, and you do lose all that progress you made, so all that devotion you used. So it's, again, kind of weird. Yeah. Like I don't,
but like I found that I would end up with another Covenant's Estus because I rested at their sanctuary. Like, okay, so this isn't going to be a base for me, but it still functions like a bonfire.
Yes, and it does switch out your item.
Yeah.
So you still do get them. I think that the one, and I could be wrong about this, I think the one for the Faith build is good because it gives you a little bit of damage resistance for a short time after you use it. But they do little things like that, like little minor perks that are not totally insignificant, but also aren't going to break the game.
Yeah.
Don't let it sway you. Pretty much just do the one that corresponds to your build. And honestly, you can get away with the entire game of not really paying attention to this, other than just plopping down merchants and guides.
Yeah.
And be fine.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't really have to go in deep with this. This Covenant thing.
Yeah. The other thing, I have this note later, but we can address it now. There is an idol you can drop called the Stone Sellsword that will allow you to do co-op. However, that is only local co-op. Yeah.
Yes, only couch co-op, which is kind of a bummer.
Yep.
Because what's that person doing up until that point? It's like they're just literally watching you play and then like waiting for you to drop. The way that co-op works in these games, like you do it to get past stress points usually. Mm-hmm. Like you might want to play the whole game co-op if you have enough of those idols. But for the most part, you want to, like, I'm having a hard time with this boss.
Right.
And this, limiting that to couch play doesn't really complement that very well.
Yeah.
So as we mentioned, you also get this vendor trash, in addition to being a thing to upgrade your Covenant. It's also how you use upgrade material.
Right.
And these are explicitly memories. There's a little lore note about the blacksmith taking memories and turning them to power up your weapon. Mm-hmm. So little notes, poems, locks of hair, things like that.
King's orders.
Yeah, King's orders is a really high one. You just find them. Mm-hmm. They're just around. It's a high level treasure. I don't think you have to do very much kind of grinding for this either. I think you'll just kind of, playing natural, you'll find enough.
Yeah, there are places you can farm for them. Like I see that peppered all over the wiki. But yeah, they're there. Speaking of grinding and farming and stuff like that, something we forgot to mention, those different idols that you put out actually affect the area around them, or the zone that they're
bonuses.
in. Yes, passive bonuses. So like the stone guide will increase your item drop, which is another good reason to use that at most of the shrines that you're going to be in.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, but you want to upgrade your weapons for all the same reasons that you upgrade your weapons in any Souls game, just because that will often make the difference, or that will often be what pushes you over the edge for beating a boss or getting through an area. Yeah.
And those vary wildly in how good they are.
Yeah,
those little bonuses, like benefit to shield blocking if you're not doing a shield build.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't really help. So this is going to be kind of a big one. Let's talk about navigation.
Yes.
In this game, this is a serious problem in this game, I think.
Yeah. And
lots of reasons why. So they could have obviated this with a map. Every game that takes the Castlevania side of this kind of equation has a map. The Igavanias that they cite as an influence, they use maps. There's a reason why those use maps, and there's a reason why Dark Souls doesn't need a map, and this does. Kind of two reasons that tie into one that's just a function of the perspective, one that's a function of the flaw of the game's design.
Right.
The perspective thing is that in Dark Souls, you can be out and about, and you're in this gigantic forest or whatever, but you know you're heading towards this windmill, and you can always see that windmill on the horizon. So you get to see like a large portion of things. You can be on a hill and look down and see the whole level. A side-scrolling view means you can see 20 feet at any given time. So you have no sense of perspective of where you're at in relation to other things other than like a mental map you've made. That side view really kind of kills this. Like it makes it really, really hard to get your bearings.
Yes.
And this is like really compounded by another problem, is that this is a really, really, really monotonous looking game.
Yeah.
Everything has this kind of gray fog filter over it. Areas look the same. There are lots of areas. Within an area, there are very few landmarks. Every once in a while there's a little trash. Like there's like here's a table and a couple chairs.
Right.
But there aren't like kind of the kind of like things that are going to stand out that you can be like, okay, this is this part of Hager's Cavern. This is another part of Hager's Cavern because this one has the laughing statue and this one has the weeping gargoyle. That's not a thing here.
Right.
It looks samey. And it gets maddening. Like I find it really, really frustrating. And I know I'm talking for a long time, Cole. I'll give you a chance to add to this. I apologize. Another thing that's really frustrating, though, and we talked about this in the Symphony of the Night thing, is another function that map gives you is that it lets you know what you've already explored and what you haven't.
Yes.
So when you get to somewhere like Hager's Cavern, if you don't want to just make a beeline to the boss, you want to check everything out. Not being able to have a sense of where you're at, not being able to tell a difference between two areas glancing at them becomes really frustrating without this kind of checklist of what you've already done. A lot of times something would look kind of new because I didn't remember it because it looks exactly the same.
Or you came at it from a different place too.
Totally. Yeah. Like you could, and I would climb up there and just nothing there.
Yeah.
It's like, it's really close to a fatal flaw, I think, in this game. Like it's not, you can still get through it, but it never didn't bother me.
Yeah. So the lack of a map, I think it is a problem just because this does need to lean more on the Castlevania side of the appeal than the Dark Souls side. So like not having a map, I can see an argument for, okay, we want to build a sense of mystery. We want to have you, we want to foster that sense of like wonderment when you break through into a new area and then slowly realize as you're going like, oh, I've been here before. This is that door I couldn't open. Like that is a good and fun feeling that, is a key to especially like the Dark Souls 1 and maybe a little bit of the Bloodborne philosophy of level design, right? However, you're absolutely right. When you're able to control the camera, when you're able to see great distances because you are effectively looking at it from your character's perspective, like not having a map makes a lot more sense as opposed to this thing, which is a grid where, assets are being placed and, it's asking you to kind of like check all of these edges without any sense of where you've been and where you haven't been. So like, the addition of teleportation and, the fact that stumbling back and finding these old areas is not, mechanically significant in a way that it would be in something that is from a different perspective, definitely makes it so like a map would be incredibly useful. I think that they lose more by not having it than they gain. The visual monotony doesn't bother me as much as it bothered you, I don't think. Again, that could just be down to taste. I could have latched on to particular things. I could have a number of things, but you're absolutely right. There is that level of confusion, especially when you're coming at an old area from a different perspective or running from a different sanctuary, etc., and down the line, where it does get in the way and actually makes getting around this world, I think, a little bit less joyful than it ought to be. Because I like platformers. I like this kind of thing.
I actually like the platforming too, and I like the way it feels to move around in this game, especially when you get these kind of extra abilities. Are actually incredibly neat. I just think that this, and this is, I'm not trying to, I'm just waiting. The argument, the man you argue with your head 24/7 that doesn't exist.
Right.
I'm just waiting for someone to call me out for saying this is an excuse too many times. Maybe there's color blindness aspects to this too.
It's possible.
Where like there's some of these browns are actually gray, or some of these grays are actually brown, and I just can't tell the difference.
It is something that I like about the game, is that even though the colors are very muted, the atmosphere often takes on a different kind of pallor or tint to it. So like I can tell by looking at a particular screenshot which area of the game it's in by the character of the light and, by some of the background details and stuff.
I'm looking at on the wiki the locations page where it has a thumbnail for all of the locations, and they all have this overwhelming gray fog over them.
Oh wow.
Like it's almost and you can look at the page, like I just feel like they're really, really samey. Yeah. There is a difference. There are a couple of exceptions, but part of this is a function of there just being too many, and this happens in Souls too, lest anybody think I'm just picking on this game, like a few too many castles, a few too many caverns.
Oh yeah.
But there is just an element of like everything being washed out.
Yeah.
Everything being this foggy, oppressive atmosphere.
It's a very desaturated game. As somebody who has close to a full spectrum of color vision, I would totally be willing to believe that is contributing a little bit to this for you.
It might be, like, because color values are a thing that I can tell apart more than the actual color a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Or like tint, tint versus shade kind of thing, or the level of saturation. That's like a real thing for me. But I also think that there's a little bit of truth to the fact that this is, even if you don't think of it in terms of just being able to tell them apart, think about like the best Souls games and how an area will be like a 180. Like think about how crisp and kind of clean like the Grand Archives look, versus Farron's Keep. Yeah. Everything here is dark and gloomy and foggy.
There's very little dynamic range between them. Yeah.
And that atmosphere thing, which initially feels a lot like a strength, I just got so sick of.
Yep.
There's no, one of the things that we praised Dark Souls 2 for is that it had the courage to be kind of pretty sometimes. There's none of that in here. There's no variety to the kind of what we're dealing with kind of visually here.
Yeah.
And that, that bums me out.
Yeah. It's not, it doesn't read as a problem of, aptitude. It feels like just a choice that they made, to give this a particular visual style that just doesn't work for you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, but it did impact my ability to like navigate. Like it wasn't just an aesthetic thing. It also made it harder for me to engage in the game systems.
Yeah.
So it's both. Like it's an aesthetic choice I think is kind of odious. And then it is also something that made it harder for me to play.
Yeah.
Both of which are valid, both of which also are subjective. Like maybe that wasn't a thing for you or anyone listening, but for me, that was a kind of a double strike. Yeah. And it kind of comes to a general aesthetic sense of this game. Like this game is kind of classless in its aesthetics in a way that I really dislike. I don't like the way the characters look. I don't really like the way the enemies are designed. I think they animate pretty badly. We'll get to that.
Yeah. Yeah. We already talked about the shortcuts.
Sometimes you've got a note here. Sometimes they are good for like boss runs.
Oh yeah.
Like area, a shortcut within an area is actually very useful. The shortcuts that go to other areas are not.
Yeah. Yeah, the shortcuts within an area, those are as good as they've been in Dark Souls. Like they're functional. It feels great when you find them, especially in some of the more odious areas. And they're not always like they're not always just like something that you unlock. Sometimes it is a realization that if you take a leap of faith here, you're going to be able to get to a place. Like they're designed as though this is a platformer, which it is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So interzone connections, again, we talked about those being a little bit goofy, vestigial. The story here is pretty neat. I like it. I like the way that it pays off. This is a very Souls-like thing. It's told through item descriptions. There's a bestiary where different enemies will, give some flavor text to them. And most of the NPCs that you're going to meet are confused. It kind of feels like they've recently suffered a blow to the head, and they speak entirely in elliptical dialogue. Yeah.
And these aren't the NPCs don't have quests the same way that Souls NPCs might.
No.
You just need to talk to them every time you run into them.
Yeah.
Because they don't really serve individual stories. They are not short stories. There aren't really short stories in this game. There are little snippets of larger stories that are made to this pastiche because you're on a haunted island that collects people's memories.
Yes.
kind of thing, which I also think is pretty neat.
Yeah.
I have, an imperfect understanding of the lore of this stuff. And we're not going to stop and just kind of say everything there is to say about all of these people. It's very much, I think, intentionally a way they tried to ape the kind of Dark Souls storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
If you are looking for this, some external reading, somebody has done, a guy named Suko13 did a kind of ebook similar to the Pale Blood Hunt called The Drowned Tome. That is his or her or their attempt to create like the definitive Salt and Sanctuary lore guide.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I'll put that in the show notes. I started reading it. I like the lore in this game, but it doesn't drive me to like read a book on it.
Right.
So like I am not going to keep reading it, but if this is something that lights your fire, like somebody has done the work, which is really cool. It's good on them and good for you, I guess.
Yes. Yeah. And we're getting into the kind of disclaimer part of this, which is we're taking a more zoomed out approach to this. We're covering Salt and Sanctuary over the course of 3 episodes, as opposed to looking at it over the course of an entire season. So there are going to be some interactions. There are going to be some, story beats and world building things that we're just going to kind of miss in service of, talking about the game in broader strokes.
Yes. And I think that's a broader thing that's going to apply to whatever this kind of amorphous season is.
Yes.
The games we do in this.
And it has so far.
It has and will continue to. So in some of those games, it's because the game maybe didn't support it. Sometimes it's because the game looks something like Moment of 4, which also had, these little stories behind each boss. They gated that behind kind of perfect play. So it was kind of hostile to get that information. And something I want to say, I think that I'm cooler on this game than you are. Neither of us are totally in love with it. I think that's fair to say.
I had a lot of problems. This was a very difficult kind of couple weeks playing this for me, actually.
So we both of us don't love it. Something that I want to put out there, just so people know, is that like if you think about how much like interest and kind of passion it would take to start this show, and I'm not saying that as a pat on my back because it's like I could have been learning to different languages, it's but like something like we obviously both really love Dark Souls and thus we made Bonfireside Chat. That love does not necessarily transfer to any of these things that are not Dark Souls.
Right.
So it doesn't mean that they're not necessarily worth it, so you can love this as much as you want. It does have that kind of lore and stuff. I don't know how much I can speak for Kole, but speaking for myself, like I'm just not as interested in doing as deep a dive on it.
Yeah.
So it's worth talking about because it is part of the Dark Souls legacy, whether those people, the people who made it would like to be kind of lumped in with that or not. It is like, this is part of Dark Souls' legacy worth us talking about, but I just can't bring myself to do as deep a dive on it because I quite honestly, like, just don't think it is as good, like for me, it just doesn't, it's like, it's rich, but it's not as interesting. I think that there's a 0 punctuation review of it, and he was really, really positive on it, but he said it's like Dark Souls where everything has a dumber name. And I'm like, oh, that's pretty much true. Like the names of all these things suck. Like the evocative factor, the kind of like cool factor is in the grand story, but there's like a level of detail that's just not cool and weird.
Yeah.
And that extends to monster designs, extends to boss designs for me. Like there are a couple of them that are cool, but for the most part, it's all pretty bland.
Yeah.
And it's just very, very hard for me to get passionate about this. Yeah.
In looking at this, I made an attempt to kind of like give it the level of detective work that I would normally give something that in mainline Dark Souls, like looking for the connections and reading every item description and, trying to find themes or central characters. A lot of it is just very disconnected kind of stuff, which is fine on its own, but, it's pursuing it would be like finding a whole bunch of like little dead ends when it doesn't add up to much, much that adds to the greater discussion.
I think so too. And to be fair, like the game squares that circle because the reason why there are all those dead ends is because of the nature of this island and the nature of the conflict. And again, I think we both think that's really pretty cool. When I started figuring out what was going on in this game, I was pretty into it.
Yeah. And like a lot of that is handled through dialogue. It is people, not so much telling short stories about themselves or you participating in their short stories, but providing a different kind of interpretation of these areas that you're going through, saying, hey, I recognize this from my earlier travels, or why is this here when it should be there?
Yes. Yeah. And so it's kind of like a tone or kind of like what's missing.
Yeah.
Here that kind of gives you that stuff. Whereas the individual things, like as much I might want to know a lot about Kareem in Dark Souls, that universe, I don't really care about the area that the Red Hall of Cages came from.
Right.
That came from another land. I don't need to know the history of that. Like I don't have that desire to make that extra step. And this is, it has applied to Souls likes. It will apply to Souls likes. I'm playing Neo now, and it makes me think of that a lot too. Like regardless of how we cover that, whether it's like one episode or two or three, I can't imagine us just going deep on the history of Hattori Hanzo.
Right. Because
or like
he's like an actual real ass person.
The parade of cameos that game rests its lore on.
Yeah.
I can't imagine, like, I'm just not interested enough, and I don't feel like that's part of me was like, oh, we do Bonfire Side Chat. We're the Souls guys. We have a responsibility to do this. And like, I want to cover every Souls game like that, but every game that takes inspiration from Dark Souls, like, is not Dark Souls and doesn't.
Yeah. Well, it needs to earn it.
It
needs to earn it on its own terms, as opposed to having a referent that we enjoy.
Yeah, and that's kind of having a referent I enjoy is a really good way to put what I think about Salt and Sanctuary.
Yeah.
Has a referent I enjoy. It's also, and I'll throw this out there too, the fact that I got so frustrated that I stopped playing the second playthrough means that some of my memory is not super great. I definitely, I played through it when it came out. I missed one of the optional areas, and that kind of plays into this. Like, I don't really feel like I'm obligated to give this the entire like Dark Souls like exhaustive front to back treatment.
Yeah.
The same way I might with a Dark Souls game.
Well, I got you, fam. Like, I played through this here, about like a week ago, like that's when I finished it up. And I've taken notes here and kind of given it at least like the watch out for fireballs depth of, kind of treatment. I played this a little bit back when it came out, but it took them adding interface zoom for it to be playable on my television. So that's why it kind of like took back burner until today.
Yeah. And I'm very specifically not that was a problem when I played it too, but I'm not holding it against it.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Like, I like that they've actually improved this a bit since the first time I played it.
Yeah.
And the second time I played it, like, I got, a decent third through the game multiple times. I just got pissed. I don't know. Life is short. New Gary quits games when I'm not having fun.
Yeah.
If it's just like, man, and also I've already done it. Yeah. So like that, I mean, that's the other big thing.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the art style. I've already kind of said my piece on it. I don't want to make that be the monolithic presentation of the network, because it sounds like you're more positive on it than I am.
Yeah, I'm pretty positive on it. I like that everything is hand drawn. That is something that is very rare. And I've just, again, I need to be wary, because the fact that this was made by two people is very impressive. I think that like it does look enough of a piece with itself that like it does feel like a big coherent piece of work, and it's impressive that a single person drew all of this stuff, did the designs for the enemies. Some of the bosses are especially great. There are things that make this a problem, like the fact that it is kind of hand drawn and sketchy is the wrong word, but it kind of gets closest to it, which is spotting things against the background, especially behind the hazy atmospheric effects that go on, spotting items on the ground, things like that. If something isn't glowing, it's easy for it to kind of fall into this flat morass. So the hand-drawn aspect of this does get in the way just a little bit. Also, the fact that larger enemies and even your character himself, by virtue of the fact that these are hand drawn, but they're not cell animated, everything kind of has a little bit of a Flash or After Effects animation style where things are rigged up like puppets. And that actually gets in the way a little bit for me of being able to watch and interpret enemies' attack patterns, just because they are going to be tweening between different things, as opposed to like striking particular like anticipation poses before they get ready to do stuff. So that gets in the way a little bit. Like, I think in Still, if you can ignore your character's head and face, this game does look pretty good to me. But yeah, it does end up getting in the way of the mechanics just a little bit.
They look like, if you don't know what we're talking about with the animation, if you've ever played any of the Scribblenauts games, they move like the Scribblenauts kid, where their arm, their shoulder joints just kind of swing, like in this way, like they move just on that joint. in a weird way. And it's not just your character; it's any NPC you run into that's human.
Yeah, because they use the same parts and kits and stuff.
I don't even really know how to describe what they're going for with the way people look.
Yeah.
In this game, but it's pretty rough. Yeah. It's like a bad Flash animation or a bad webcomic. The eyes are like really, really far apart. It's just a really weird style that I don't think does it a whole lot of favors. And the other kind of problems I already mentioned, so spend too much more time on it.
Enemies look pretty good. I like the enemy designs.
I think the enemy designs are stronger than the boss designs for the most part. Like there are some that are like kind of no great shakes, but there are a couple cool things like the floating eyeball guys. There are a couple of things that look neat.
Yeah.
The bosses run together for me a lot. And we'll talk about that as we go. I think that is a general problem that permeates kind of the whole game, but is something that, we'll talk about more when it comes up, is that it's very hard. And some of this is just that it's Dark Souls with worse names thing, but it's very hard for me there are a lot of areas in this game and there are a lot of bosses.
So many bosses. And
it's really hard is which giant guy with a big sword is this? Is it the this nonsense phrase or the this nonsense phrase? None of these guys, they have like kind of paragraph stories you can find, but none of them have that kind of like kind of idolic power that a Dark Souls boss has, where you do the thing, and we talked about this in the end of the Dark Souls 3 season, where it's like you spend the level going through them, learning about them, this is their domain. This entire level speaks to this character. And then you get there and it's like, wow, this guy makes sense. I've been reading about them. I've been seeing their agents. I've been learning about them. Here they are. This game whiffs on that pretty hard.
Yeah.
Like here's a ghost pirate at the end of a dumb cavern. There were crab monsters there. Enjoy. There's not like it doesn't, that part of it does not feel to a piece to me.
Yeah. There are like one or two times where that happens, where like I felt like a boss properly defined the area around them.
It's just rare, and when you have this many areas, it's not just there are a few times, it's like low by percentage, because this is weirdly like a very big game with like something like 23 bosses or something like that. Which is a big reason why we're doing this in 3 episodes rather than 2, just because there's so many boss fights in it. So
the other disclaimer that we should probably give is that because this is a 2D platformer, the space is not as well defined as a 3D game. So we're not going to be able to kind of approach this with a level of granularity, just because the space doesn't define the flow of game as much as it does in that. So when we talk about an area, instead of giving fiddly navigation bits, we're going to be talking about what is the general feel, what is the gimmick, what are the unique enemies that it introduces, and especially the bosses themselves. So like this is going to be highlights as opposed to, like, oh, and on this screen, here's the thing they're trying to teach you.
It's going to be highlights as opposed to highlights for kids, which means there's all tons of bush. Like Goofus's bush, Gallant's bush. You just get to see bush for miles. It's highlight for adults.
I really don't like the phrase bush for miles.
You like bush for miles?
I mean, like in principle it might be okay, but just the nightmare version, the crazy like berserk eclipse that I'm picturing when you say bush for miles, it's pretty upsetting to me actually. I'm not super into that either. Yeah. Now that I think about it.
But anywho, it's going to be highlights for adults. So we're going to give just kind of give those highlights, and that actually comes up with like any 2D game we do.
Yeah.
Like being like, oh, at this point there are a couple of individual set pieces where it's like, at this point this ledge is positioned by the sniper, so when you climb up it you get knocked off, things like that. But there's not so much of that it it doesn't feel like it's worth calling out the same way that some game like another platformer with. This wasn't even. I don't even feel like that was worth calling out to that degree in Symphony,
right?
Which is a masterpiece. Like, there are platformers that do that. I don't think this is one.
Yeah.
So
this will be closer to Symphony than it was to Shovel Knight. So
yeah. Let's get started.
Yeah. So we don't know how far each episode is going to go. Check the description. To figure out, like, we can't say we're going to go through X place, but we know where we're going to start, which is the beginning with our intro scroll.
Well, before that, you do make your character. It's worth noting that, so you have different classes you can pick. These don't make as big a difference even as they do in Dark Souls. It's just a couple stat points.
Yeah.
And your opening equipment, and none of the opening equipment is great. But you have, a knight, a paladin, wizard, fighter, things like that, standard things. A couple interesting ones. The hunter is explicitly a Bloodborne reference.
He's got a tricorn hat and everything,
and a whip and a crossbow. There is a pauper, which is the equivalent of the depraved or what have you.
Mm-hmm.
And then you choose your starting kingdom.
There's also the cook.
Oh yeah, that's their joke with their samurai dishwasher, I think.
Yeah,
that's a joke with that. The cook, which fights with a frying pan.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty cute. And then you can choose your origin, which is kind of how you customize your skin color.
Yes.
And that's these different areas. So through that, kind of seeing everyone's origins, this opening scroll, we actually know who these two kingdoms are.
Mm-hmm.
The kind of the lore stirs behind Salt and Sanctuary have kind of figured out this mystery or whatever.
Yes. But this kind of breaks down to a little bit of like a Helen of Troy kind of thing. The world's been at war for centuries. The ship that we're on is delivering the princess from one kingdom to the kind of rival kingdom in order to seal a peace accord, essentially.
Ascaria and Tristan.
Yes.
Are the two kingdoms, which are kind of told by context clues.
Mm-hmm.
We make up in the ship's hold as we're getting boarded by kind of bandits.
Yes.
And this is your combat tutorial here.
Yeah. Low stakes, very, very low stakes as you're going in. Kind of, it is teaching you to do your basic combos. It's very fun in this game, I think, to initiate the juggle combo a little bit, to like shoot people up into the air. For some reason, that is always fun in whatever game it is included in, and ends up being very useful. But you are just kind of working your way through this very small dungeon until you get to the unspeakable deep, who is our, presumably unbeatable boss that will kill you.
Yeah, you can beat him.
Yep.
If you beat him, you get some upgrade material and a bunch of experience. It's pretty tedious though, because he can kill you in one hit.
Oh yeah.
And he looks like Cthulhu. Like it is explicitly looking like Cthulhu. And these are Krakens. In this world, Krakens don't mean Kraken. They are gigantic beasts that live underwater, but there are ones that can go on land. And they can shapeshift.
Yeah.
They're kind of like demigods, sort of like just gigantic, very powerful monsters.
Yes, and we're going to be encountering a lot of them because they love this island that we're on.
Most of the bosses are Krakens.
Yes.
Some of them are just people, but a lot, that kind of slowly are ascending to candlelit, this kind of god status, candlelit souls in this game. But for the most part, it is they're Krakens.
Yes. Yeah. But this thing, regardless of if you defeat it or not, has sunk the ship, and you awaken on the beach. And this sets up the quest for the game, which is to find the princess. And that quest does not hold at all.
Yes.
It becomes irrelevant compared to the task of figuring out what's going on here and getting off of the island itself.
So yeah, that question, you're just kind of moving forward to the right on this beach. We run into this old man. We're going to learn more about him later. He shows up, and you can't really get past this guy. He asks which gods you follow.
Yes.
This is your choice of the three kind of opening covenants.
Yep. This is not explained, and this is one of the major reasons why you're going to want to play with Wiki in hand. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of consequences to it. They kind of ramp up covenants slower in Dark Souls, and they have less effect. Whereas this is something, if you want to play a strength character and choose the Faith Covenant, you won't be able to buy cool stuff for a while. Until you naturally run into, one of the Iron Ones.
Yes.
And can change covenants. You can't just change willy-nilly. You have to actually do it at one of their places. So
again, the dialogue is very elliptical. As you're talking to them, it's kind of like, oh, do you hold to the current gods? No. Well, are you the old god or no god? It's like, well, do you worship yourself? Okay, well, that maybe tacks on to strength.
Yeah. It's a little bit frustrating the way this is articulated. I wish this had just been a character creation choice.
Yeah.
And been kind of explained a little bit.
Yeah.
But this also, the reason why you have to talk to this guy, he gives you a sanctuary key.
Yes.
You head forward into the first sanctuary, and you get your healing items from the shrine. You're kind of limited. You only start out with, I think, 3.
Yeah.
And
that is supplemented by the red shards, which are weirdly enough in vials.
Yes, red shards, which are in vials, which are healing crystals. They heal you very little and kind of slowly, but they're useful for in-between encounter healing, similar to Dark Souls 2.
Yeah, and I like those. I like popping those as insurance. Just over the course of play, you're never going to run out of them. So
we didn't really talk about starting gifts. There's a couple different starting gifts you can start with, and don't start with the healing items.
No,
because you'll run into them and people will drop them like crazy. You can get the ring that gives you plus 10% salt, which is really good. But the kind of pro choice is the Amber Idol,
Yes.
which allows you to make kind of boss weapons early.
Yeah. Normally you can't find amber idols outside of like very rare drops until like the second episode that we're going to be talking about.
Yeah. So it's that will give you a huge leg up. You don't really know that starting out, but that is what you should do if you're going to give this a shot.
Yeah. And that's how you get your Drake sword, you know?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. So as you're going, like you're picking up these bottles, and it's this is your tutorialization. These bottles are kind of hard to see, especially against the ground clutter. But you're fighting these zombies. These the
bottles are soapstone messages.
Yes, there we go.
Which we didn't mention. So this is the way that the game is giving you your tutorial, and players can leave these as well. The players will. There are secret walls in this game.
Yes.
They don't have a visual tell that I can tell. So this is how I found most of them.
The closest thing to a visual tell, most of them have an item behind them, and that will kind of glow through the fog of war.
Yeah, if you can see them. But some of them just go into just a whole room without an item there. Like it just goes into a room. Those ones I don't know how you tell other than just humping every wall, Doom style, and I didn't want to hump every wall, so I just waited for messages to tell me. But you're just fighting zombies. There are regular ground zombies that kind of move slow, similar to low level hollows. There are archers up on kind of scaffolding.
Yeah.
What are they building here?
they I mean, it could be like a defensive thing. They do a good job of introducing the slow, weak ones, then giving them weapons, and then having them covered by the archers. Like this is a good low stakes run up between the sanctuary and the festering banquet.
Yeah, the festering banquet, which is our first actual area of the game. I'd still kind of consider this tutorial really up through this first boss. So this is this used to be a fortress and has kind of turned into this charnel house kind of place where people did eat. You can see there are banquet areas. There are tables with kind of rotting food on them.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that all of that just exists to justify this. I like this name. I admit calling a place the Festering Banquet. That is, ring a bell, evocative to
good.
me. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, there are exceptions.
Yes.
To it, but then, and then even the next major area, the Village of Smiles. But then you end up with Sunken Keep, Bandits Pass,
Watching Woods.
Yeah, Mire of Stench, Cran's Pass. Who's Cran? Like, there's just like people aren't named very well in this game. The great person Cran.
Yeah.
Give me a break. Like it's like it's too much like Cran Apple or like Cranberry or Crantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is still good though. So
let's just say that Cran has some reasons to be bitter.
That is true. Cran, the lore is deep with Cran. But this is the Festering Banquet. Again, still part of that tutorial. They're zombies. They're kind of introducing the kind of multi-level combat. Here, combat on stairs, things like that, or ladders rather, and kind of ramps.
So there are stairs. There are Castlevania style stairs. There are temporary platforms, that will crumble away beneath you, and then return. Those are used to infuriating effect later. It gets really rough.
Yeah.
But
and this is actually a pretty well designed area too, because
I like this a lot.
The secret structure in this level is pretty neat. You're going kind of in and out of the banquet, out of the tower as you move, and making your way outside, kind of dropping down, things like that. You can find a lot of kind of fun secrets.
Yeah, you can kick down a ladder that'll let you bypass the ground floor.
And right outside, right by that ladder, there are 3 people hung, and these are actually other players. It's their armor from people who died.
Yeah,
to this area.
That happens in several places actually, and it's always to a good effect.
Yeah, even though everyone just wears there's a goofy pumpkin hat.
Oh yeah.
So like it either looks really cool because what are these 3 pumpkin monsters doing hanging here, or it's just like 2 warriors and some idiot in a pumpkin head, and it ends up like who brought Carl.
Who brought Carl? You have to go all in on pumpkin heads.
yeah. But that's kind of the meme thing in this. Other than like,
it's a good helmet. It's a really good helmet for fire resistance.
Or potato armor. The Potato Knight. There's a Dark Souls reference.
It's the russet armor.
Fire. Yeah. But yeah, there's a couple little silly bits that the community has really embraced.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is pretty well designed. I like this a lot as like our undead burg. style area. They introduce kind of these dog type enemies, the feral beasts. Like you step outside and then just immediately is like right on top of you. And that little room is very well designed to like get you to, understand, hey, you can jump over enemies to get like above them on a level. And like this for me was where I really started learning to rely on jump attacks as well, doing like the drop attack stuff.
Yep. Skull bats are introduced here, which are your first flying enemy. By far not the worst, but pretty annoying and pretty ubiquitous.
Yeah.
So flying enemies in this game can attack you. One thing that Salt and Sanctuary and doing a 2D game reminds me of, and I came up with this comparison, I think I was talking about it on Twitter, is that it's almost like every enemy is a new Londo ghost, in that every enemy can come at you from any angle, including through the ground.
Yeah.
So and flying enemies form like 40% of the things you fight, 30%. It's a lot.
Yeah.
You'll fight a lot of like kind of ghosts and phantoms and stuff like that. And it can just be very frustrating when they are coming up at a 45-degree angle from the ground in front of you.
Yeah.
And there's just nothing you can do.
Yeah. Or when they're chasing you directly through level geometry.
That's what the fire ghosts are one of my least favorite enemies in this game. And we'll get to those guys in a couple levels. And I think those guys just literally, I think that monster is like unconscionable. I think that guy's not okay.
Yeah. These flying enemies, especially when they're coming above you, you benefit from having a weapon that will do an overhead attack, which speaks to, again, like variety, choosing the right tool for the job. But because flying enemies are so common, like it makes, using like a thrust type weapon less viable in a lot of cases, especially because of that knockback, especially because they're often mixed in with other types of enemies.
Yeah, you can have an alternate weapon that you can switch back and forth between, but I don't want to be switching back and forth between, 3 weapons.
Right.
And if you're a caster or something like that extra weapon you're switching back and forth is probably your wand.
Yeah.
Or what have you.
Yeah, and if you're using big weapons like I was using that as a way to quickly switch between 2-hand and 1-hand.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's not like you can necessarily be loaded out with things to tackle. It's missing sub weapons.
Yeah, that's the thing. We're missing the axe. Yeah.
Yeah, Castlevania has the axe. That's why Castlevania has the axe. This you do have thrown weapons, but you have to stop and aim them.
Yeah.
If you want to shoot them up, there's no lock on.
Mm-hmm.
So you just it takes a little while, and these enemies tend to be pretty quick. Again, not so much with the bats, but those fire ghosts that can literally rot in hell are very fast.
Gary, them rotting in hell is why they're here.
That's what they want. They probably don't want the rot part.
Oh, true. Yeah.
So it'd be like, because I don't want to, like, let's say, like, I don't want to rot over at Fire in the Mountains. Like, I like that place.
Yeah.
I'd like to be there. I like chicken wings, but I don't want to rot there.
I'm just picturing you being held in state like Lenin.
Yeah, people eating wings off me.
Yeah,
I think like a really grisly image. Like if you looked at it from the side and there's a corpse lying down,
it literally would be a festering banquet, or at least a festering buffet.
It looks very different from 3D from 2D. Like it is. Yeah.
I love our fixation on what happens with our bodies after we die.
Yeah, I'm very curious.
Yeah.
So you kind of continue to climb up. Going in and kind of out of the tower until ultimately you get up to the top where our first real boss is, the Sodden Knight.
Yep. This is a large cloaked knight enemy who attacks with a gigantic sword, which you can get by turning in his ashes. And we're introduced to the battle music, which is almost uniformly, squeedily guitars. We
didn't talk about the music in this, but there's a real dearth of music.
Right.
It feels like there are 2 songs. That's not quite the case, but the boss music is the same for each boss.
Yeah,
pretty much, and that's actually a real problem and plays into navigation.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So like in Symphony of the Night, we talked about this in that episode, where the upside down castle is hard to navigate, or more like less fun to navigate than the right side up castle, because when you go into an area in Symphony of the Night, not only do you have this entirely different visual palette, which Salt doesn't have, but you have a new song. To associate with that area. Here, that's not the case. It's silent, except every once in a while, butt rock guitars chime up. And then the bosses all have the same music, which gives them like a lack of identity.
Yeah.
Think about how you think about the Moonlight Butterfly versus Ornstein and Smough, and how much of that has to do with the music.
Yeah. That music, not even when it's just at its best, but even when it's just being used as intended, is a way to help extend the story of these
Yes.
of these things. There are times where they'll reuse different tracks, but like even that feels like it's to the same effect. Again, like using your example, Moonlight Butterfly, that track being used again for Gwendolyn. That says something,
Yes. That's kind of to a purpose, and that's very rare. This is something I chalk up to just it literally being a really small team.
Yeah.
So I understand it, even though whenever I think about that excuse for some of the shortfallings, I'm just like, why didn't you make the game 2/3 as long?
Yeah, that's the thing.
Take some of that time and the resources spent. I know it's not a 1-to-1 ratio. I know game development is hard. I have a lot of respect for these guys for making this.
Oh yeah, it's fucking great, but like
it's very functional. But
yeah,
there's some misplaced priorities, I think.
Yeah.
And they could have made something that was truly great, instead of something that like I put it like a C and you probably put it like a B. So like I don't know, that it gets frustrating to me that this is such a problem when I got sick of playing the game long before it was over.
Right.
Or so. Anywho, the Sod Knight is a pretty good fight though.
Yep.
Big cloaked knight guy who has these kind of different slashes and combos. Every enemy has 2 phases in this game. Has after they get to half health or so, they start doing new attacks,
right,
and get more aggressive. So he has a 3-hit combo. He just gets a lot more jumpy and fast halfway through.
Yeah, he will complement his melee attacks with lightning that shoots along the floor. Again, making this into a platforming challenge a little bit, like knowing when to jump over those things and being able to like turn that into a dodge behind him is pretty important. Like this also for me was a blocking tutorial because you're never really forced to do that so much with the regular rank and file enemies. I don't think about Dark Souls style blocking in a platformer just because that's just not the way things usually work. Here, I had to adapt to that. So I think this is a very effective way to like get you up to speed. Yeah,
I mean, I in either time I played this, the first time or the 4 times I fought this guy, I never really did very much blocking. I just rolled behind him, hit him once, and then rolled back as he turned around. To me, this is a tutorial on I guess it's a good boss because it teaches you a couple different things. This is the first guy where you have to roll through him to get to the other side and still engage him.
Yeah, it's both.
You're not doing that to bypass him. You're doing it to avoid an attack and get to the other side. And then he gets, moves that he gets his like very fast strike behind him move that every boss gets when, you're going to be back there. Nowadays. But it's a pretty good fight.
Yeah.
And usually when I beat him, because he's not very hard, but because I'm so weak, low level, like I beat him and I don't have very much health left.
Yeah.
So it feels really good. And the game does a really like kind of kinesthetically pleasing, like the last hit, everything slows down as you hit him. Like it's really dramatic and good.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
Especially if you're just beating them by the skin of your teeth, or it's been several different attempts, getting to that does feel very good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So killing him gets you the key for the back door out of the banquet itself, where you meet your second NPC here, this masterless knight, kind of has a samurai top knot, who, kind of asks me why I'm here, says, oh, rescuing a princess, how cliche, and says, oh, I'm going to go to this castle to the east and slay the dragon there. Good.
Or I was going to say, this is the way he talks about it is the first kind of hint things aren't right, because he's got, people in video games never have a proper sense of terror. As what's going on with them, but he's very like he's talking about this in terms of kind of stories. Like if there's a dragon, it has to be slayed. If there's a princess, that has to be rescued. And like that's weird. That's meta. And the fact that that actually ends up playing into the big reveal.
Yeah.
For this.
Yeah. But he says like, hey, there's this castle over there, but there's also a passageway beneath the castle itself. I think for framing up the shape of the world, it's important to go over to the Bandit's Pass, even if it does get to a dead end, because this will set up one of the first real kind of ability gates that we're going to get to.
Yeah. And so you head to your right, you fight some more kind of bandits on your way. You run to your first sanctuary that is claimed.
Right.
This is the sanctuary of Devaris, the goddess of light, who is kind of the general cleric, peace goddess, healing goddess.
Yes.
Type character.
Yeah. So this was just a bonfire for me, which is fine. And like the path even to the right of that is kind of filled with these more resilient raider zombies. Bigger guys. There's kind of an upper level in the trees there over this horrifying looking charnel pit that all these weaker zombies are going to raise out of.
Yeah. And that kind of goes on forever. It's like a clown car of zombies, that section there. It should be noted too, real quick, before we move on from that sanctuary, is that you do get an item that can convert sanctuaries
Yes.
to your own things. You can pretty much just be like, no, you're my religion now. All right? And it's very funny. Everyone shuffles out and new guys shuffle in from like just like from backstage or whatever.
I love that. Yeah, like all of the background decorations sink into the ground and yours pop up.
Yep, it's very, very funny.
Yeah. It's like when all those Circuit Cities turned into Halloween stores.
Yeah, like I'm sure this used to be a Pizza Hut. Like, I'm sure this used to be a Mountain Smith clan. But essentially you're fighting kind of tougher versions of zombies here. Right. This is actually balanced pretty well for being after the Festering Banquet.
Mm-hmm. I mean, this is a great place. Like I gave myself a couple of like advantage levels. I did a little bit of grinding here to make the next areas easier.
But essentially what you're doing, and this also has its first kind of like real platforming challenge, that series of kind of narrow platforms that leads to treasure, with jumps you're kind of going to barely make, which is going to be a thing. You mantle in this game.
Yes.
You grab onto ledges. That can be a little bit fiddly in this game, but I definitely missed some that I don't feel like I should have missed, and that's a real bad feeling when the stakes are death. But for the most part, most part it works.
Yes. Yep. There's a small little area you can get to that is actually the outlet for a smaller kind of shortcut you're gonna get to from later. This is like a very dark place with some chain gear. That's pretty good. Again, showing you elevators that you can't activate, like knowing the language of these games, this is going to be a place to get back to.
Yes. And essentially you're going to the east here to find a dead end. There's a guy here who says like, this obelisk here, there's this gigantic glowing obelisk thing, will actually get you in, but you're not equipped for it yet.
Right. And it's not clear what these obelisks are going to do, like, because the thing that's stopping you from getting over there is like a bottomless pit, like the bridge is out. Yeah.
And so the payoff of this is actually pretty cool.
Yes.
And we'll get to that later, but this is something I actually really like in this game. So instead of doing that, you're supposed to go kind of down and left to the Village of Smiles.
I love this name. I don't know why.
It's a kids dentistry place from.
Yeah. Oh gosh, kids dentistry places creep me out. There's one right across the way from my post office where the PO box is, and every time, like it's the only strip mall building that I've seen where like the facade has fallen down and the sign like got damaged in a storm. It was kind of like the Flanders house a little bit. Nothing else around it was damaged, but like it was just the kids dentist.
On my way to my friend drove me to the airport when I was at home last, and we drove by a children's dentist that had a giraffe like sculpted to be bursting out of the bricks.
Oh no,
with human teeth.
Oh god,
it was the worst.
You just triggered a mememory. Oh god, you just raised a nightmare. Oh.
Like it was amazing. Like I looked over and I'm like, oh, that's good. Because it's like there's silly shit like that. There's a seafood place here in Portland that has a big like fish bursting out of the roof, like as like a fake sculpture thing, but it just looks like a fish. It doesn't have human teeth.
Yeah, no. Anything with human teeth that ought not have human teeth immediately makes it terrifying.
It's
just
pretty
picture a dog with human teeth.
Orange.
Yeah.
So the thing about a children's dentist is that my relation to dentistry, like I could probably use that kind of soft touch. Like I need someone to come in and just like tell me how good and brave I am, and
you need somebody to put on some Tiny Toons. Yeah.
I need to watch some Tiny Toons and then just pump me full of kid drugs. Just like really, really fill me to the gills. Like give me 3 doses of kid drugs, please, and then like take out my teeth. So
can I give you a note? Never say kid drugs again.
No, like you can give whatever notes you want, but I'm gonna follow it. You give what you want, I'll follow what I want. I want them kid drugs.
Yeah.
But the adult version of that is sedation dentistry, which like I've legitimately looked at because I just want someone to knock me out and then just do all the stuff they need to do.
Yeah. But the Village of Smiles, this is not the Blighttown of the game, but you would be forgiven for thinking that it is.
Like it kind of looks like you go through a cave on your way here first. That's kind of worth mentioning because you run into your first floating major enemy.
Oh yeah,
these kind of like dorky ghosts with sickles for hands.
Yeah, the blade wraiths.
Blade wraith, and you also run into a little beggar that sells upgrade materials, kind of at a premium, but they're things that you would have to grind for otherwise.
Yes.
So this guy is kind of good. But for the most part, you kind of move through this dark cave. There's also introduces the torch mechanic, which is lifted almost entirely from Dark Souls 2.
Yeah, you don't have like a number of torches. Each torch that you find just adds to the total time.
Yeah. And you are giving up a shield the same way you do in Dark Souls 2. Those blade wraiths, I don't like them very much. They can come at you from weird angles, and if you don't have a lot of reach.
They're best here where they're going to be like above the town square, and like it's like a little miniature arena for it. Like in the cave itself, like just the restricted mobility works against you with it.
Yeah, because there are a lot of pits in this cave.
Yeah. But the Village of Smiles itself, you kind of break out, and you very quickly see that there are people who are kind of strung up. This is the place, like Lenia, the Queen of Smiles, was the ruler of this place, who would decorate the walls with the smiling corpses of the people that she kind of persecuted until the populace turned on her and then made her the Queen of Smiles herself.
Yes.
We're kind of seeing the results of that here, especially as the dogs come at you and the spike log trap comes down, and at a low level will probably like ace you.
Yeah. The traps in this game, they tend to be just tripwires.
Yep.
Like all good traps, and once you know what you're looking for, they're not that big a deal. They start doing some kind of bullshit with them in some of the platformer heavy areas where they put them right on the edge of a ledge.
Yeah.
You can't really avoid tripping them when you climb up on it.
Yeah, and in those cases, that is often the first trap you're going to see in that area. So the way they signal that there's the possibility of a trap knocking you off of a platform is to have a trap knock you off the edge of a platform.
Yeah. Which is again, that's kind of an annoying consequence.
Yep.
To kind of teach a lesson. They also do things sometimes where, like this, if you don't immediately rush into this level, an enemy will trip this trap for you. And they do things like that, which I really like, actually. There's another log trap where this is very likely to happen a little bit later on your way to the Queen of Smiles, the boss, where they add that. I think that's how you demonstrate traps.
Yeah.
That's a really good way to do it. The kind of bigger deal here, other than the dogs and just kind of scrubs, is this Bronze Knight.
Yes.
These are the Black Knight equivalent. These are slow, tanky, kind of like 8 foot tall in comparison knights. And this I feel like is your parry tutorial, because if you don't want to parry these things, they take for fucking ever.
Yeah, you're just doing scratch damage to them. Yeah,
you barely can do damage to them, and your parries again don't do as much damage as they do in Dark Souls, but you can attack guys while they're getting up. So your parry does huge amounts of knockback, or your riposte rather. And you can hit guys while they're getting up and kind of make this not take literally a million years.
Yeah. I like these guys. I think they're pretty fun. I think that they are often so these guys, and when they start bringing in kind of equivalents that are either quicker or ones that are a little bit more casty, I always feel like they're mixed in pretty well.
Yeah. It's fun to parry in this game. So you take this guy out, and if you don't want to, the nice thing about how this guy's positioned too is that if you are not comfortable with parrying, if you lead him back into the cave, you have a height advantage. So you can always jump up on a ledge and heal. You can do drop attacks from there.
Yeah.
Things like that. One thing that's frustrating that with enemies being able to follow you through screen transitions is they can hit you through those as well.
Yep.
So you can be standing next to a screen transition and have someone strike you from off screen.
Yeah.
Which I think shouldn't have been in the game. But anywho.
Yeah. So the centerpiece of this is the town square, which you get to. There are other traps, like there are auto crossbows that are kind of pointed at you. That's the other thing that is kind of harrying you here. There's a sanctuary down below, but the centerpiece is this square with a blade wraith over the top of it. But at ground level, there are all of these corpses just kind of like thrown around. That isn't strange. What is strange is this grisly looking scarecrow that you can speak to. Who has what I think is some pretty well-written apocalyptic dialogue. I like the menace that he throws in, especially because, well, what the fuck? It's a scarecrow, when more accurately, it is a crucified body.
Yeah, just dressed as a scarecrow.
Yeah.
I think this thing is cool and mysterious.
Yeah.
We're gonna keep running into this guy, and he essentially just kind of says some spooky shit, and then says, will you kneel? Will you bend the knee? I don't know what happens if you say yes. I feel like that's the kind of question that's designed for people who play games to never say yes to.
Yeah, well, even if you say yes, it's like, I don't believe you. Like everybody,
but thou must
kind of, but like it's play for it. It's like, even if you believe that you would give up, I will kind of extract it from you through pain, like I'm not going to let you give up that easy because you're going to deny me my fun kind of thing.
Yeah. But and when you talk to him, the screen kind of pushes in and kind of shakes and there's a rumbling sound and stuff like that. So you do a pretty good job with it being kind of a 2D, not super immersive game of giving the effect of that's not voiced, of giving the effect of him just having like this gravelly kind of terrifying voice. Like I think this guy's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And I mean we'll get to what he is. There's not real reason to be coy about it, but just we run into him a bunch.
The second portion of the level is this kind of dark upper layer that has another Bronze Knight in it and a couple more traps. This is that place where it demonstrates, sometimes enemies will just walk into the tripwires. Yeah.
And this demonstrates another kind of frustrating thing I find with boss runs, because this is on your way to the boss run. You have to kind of make a pretty decent little boss run for this boss.
Yeah.
Later boss runs are a little bit more lenient. Is that enemies will follow you for a long time in this, and it just kind of plays into that, like, you should be able to run past shit.
Yeah.
Thing that I want. So
if you don't take care of the Blade Wraith, it'll come at you with everything it has.
Yeah, it will follow you into this area where you have to stop because of this trap. Like, it really wants you just to clear this over and over and over, I feel like. And I don't like that particularly. Bosses can also follow you, or enemies can follow you into boss arenas.
Yep.
Which should never have been in the game. And that ends up becoming a problem for a later boss that I know was a contentious point for you as well.
Yeah.
So we'll talk about that. The Blade Wraith has never followed me that far because there's kind of like a long drop in this cave.
Yeah.
But that is a possibility, and I think it's lame. I think around here is when you might get your first charm. You want to talk about those real quick?
Yeah.
Before we go to the boss.
Let's hit that because I like these.
Yeah, I think it's a really cool idea. It's what they do instead of, like, you can improve weapons at the blacksmith, your standard kind of +1, +2. But instead of infusing them, we have these charms that you can append onto a weapon, only certain weapons, and they give you different effects. So like poison damage, fire damage. But some of them are pretty interesting, like additional reach, which is really cool, like makes your weapon longer when you attack. And that's a really cool thing to play with. Or attack speed, things like that. And there's a kind of a wide variety of these things. Pretty neat.
Yeah, and it's again in a game that asks you to be pretty adaptable. I like that you're able to swap these out kind of on the fly without any real cost.
Yeah. You're not appending it to the weapon permanently.
Yeah,
you can switch them out whenever you want.
So effectively, it's like a more specialized ring slot that you just kind of always have dedicated toward that.
Yeah, and I think it's a really smart addition that you are able to do it wherever you want, as opposed to a Bloodborne, like, you can change rings in this one place.
Right.
Kind of thing.
Yeah. So the boss here is the Queen of Smiles. Again, this is that Queen Lenia who was sacrificing all these people. And she looks pretty cool. She's got kind of this Queen Edea kind of structure on her back. I don't know, like it's all
like
of
the Lady
her...
of Pain a little bit.
Yeah, Lady of Pain. There we go. Yeah, she's got like just she's very spiky woman.
This is something where I think the actual visual design of this looks okay, but the animation makes it look silly.
Yeah, especially like because she always has to be facing you.
Yeah. That attack
facing
she does,
the camera. I mean,
the second attack she does, where she kind of like wheels her arms backwards and runs at you, is so silly looking that it makes it impossible for me to think this is cool or scary.
It kind of looks like she is. I'm playing Salt and Sanctuary, but this is an opponent from Samba de Amigo.
Yeah, it reminds. It's the exact same thing that Bart and Lisa do, where like Bart's like, I'm going to wheel my arms like this and walk towards you, and if you get in the way, it's your own fault. The Queen of Smiles, Linnea, the person who used to skin everyone's faces so they smiled, is doing the same thing that Bart does. And it's really silly looking, and it just I don't know. I think that's part of it's hard for me to be scared to take some of this stuff seriously.
Yeah,
because of that animation issues. Mostly this is I think this is a pretty easy boss. So she does some kind of swipes. She does a lot of charges. So I think if this is teaching you anything, it's dodging through like a charging enemy with precise timing, which is a valuable lesson.
Yeah. If she's at a distance from you, she will kind of fire off these star patterns with small blades from her
Yes.
back. Again, make like this is a platformer, so they can use these platformer vocabulary tricks.
Yeah. And she, as her second kind of phase, she does that like whoa, 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 wheeling arm attack thing I was talking about. And then also just, again, is more aggressive, moves more. She has, this is one of the only times the game really, really clearly telegraphs a weakness, because she's weak to holy damage, and they just give you holy resin.
Yeah.
Like literally right outside her boss door. That's pretty rare. That bosses do that in this game, but this one they're actually saying, hey, do this because it's an early boss.
Yeah. I like the way the holy resin works in this. It is just a page from a holy book that you rub up and down your sword.
Yep.
Yeah. Good theming.
Yeah. Do you have to beat this boss? I don't think so.
Maybe. I think you do.
Do you have to? Okay.
Yeah, I think that's the only way into the
Watching
Watching
Woods.
Woods.
There's another way to get into the Watching Woods.
Yeah, I think that she's a gatekeeper for that. Like, there are lots of ways from the Watching Woods and the Sunken Keep back into this, but there's only one way from here into the Watching Woods.
It might just be a jump you can't make, because there's definitely, when you're down on the ground in the Village of Smiles, if you head down to your lower right, you'll run into the Watching Woods.
Oh yeah, that's totally. No, I think. But
maybe you can't. Maybe you can't get to the boss from there or something like that.
Yeah.
But this has this weird kind of feeling to this boss, where it's like you go after you beat her, you go into this kind of cave beneath her, and it opens up in the Watching Woods. And I was like, I already went here and decided not to go here because I hadn't beat the boss yet. It was a little bit weird when that first happened.
Yeah. It's like a different place that you end up running into. Yeah. And with the Queen of Smiles down, that ends the first episode. I know that is incredibly early, in the second major area, but the generalities took a lot of time for us to cover. So
there are a lot of systems in this game.
Yeah.
So it's gonna pick up the pace for the next episode next week, because the areas go quick and the bosses go pretty quick.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for listening. If you have, at the time you're hearing this, it is not too late. If you have feedback for Salt and Sanctuary, this might be the last chance though. You get, depending on how we record. So if you're hearing this and you have things to say about Salt and Sanctuary, make sure you head over to Duckfeed.tv/contact and let us know right away.
Yeah, sooner is certainly better than later.
Yes.
Yeah. If you're listening to this as well, you are able to purchase the Diggity Duck bundle. This is the first episode that we're doing after that has released. We did a special episode with Jim Crawford, the designer of Frog Fractions 2, talking about the Souls of Darkness LCD game that is included in Frog Fractions 2.
Absolutely. Yeah. If you like this show in general, hit us up at patreon.com/DuckFeed.tv. That is a huge deal, and we really, really do appreciate it. Lets us do new shows, lets us continue to make shows, keeps the lights on. Yeah. In general.
Yep. And if you're thirsty for more and you haven't checked it out, go check out other shows on the network, like Watch Out for Fireballs, which
we referenced like 1,000 times in this episode because it's really relevant. That is it's us doing this kind of approach to Castlevania Symphony of the Night, which is, if you came to Salt and Sanctuary from Souls, go to Symphony of the Night from Salt and Sanctuary. I think you'll dig it.
Yeah, we had one particular episode that was like that. The entire show is not Symphony of the Night.
Yes, that is true. That'd be amazing. Episode 151.
Yep.
The Flea Rider. So yeah, but it is different games and stuff. And then there are other shows on the network as well. That you should definitely check out. If you go to Duckfeed.tv, you can see kind of everything we have on offer. I want to make a real quick just a point of saying that I know about Hollow Knight. I'm not cranky about that when people ask me about it. I just want everyone to know that like it's kind of a hazard of the job, and it's fine, but I just I know about it. Just so if you're listening to this episode and you're wondering whether I know about Hollow Knight, I do know about it. We do keep up on Souls-likes.
Yes.
I'm not super plugged into mainstream game media, but I follow a lot of YouTubers that are in the Souls community. I do keep up on Souls stuff. So things like The Surge, things like Hollow Knight, I know about Eater. I know about these games that are going to come out. And it's not, I know that your heart's in the right place when you like hit us up about that. But just so you know, like we already know about it. Yeah. And so if I respond and I sound short or something like that, it's just because I've been asked like a bunch of times. Yeah.
There are usually two parts of those messages. Do you know about this? Yes, we do. Are you going to cover it on the show? We're thinking about it.
Yeah. That's always the answer. Yeah. Like we're still trying to figure it out because we have to schedule around the Dark Souls 3 DLC. We also have to schedule around, the future of the show is we're still figuring it out.
Yeah.
So, but that is what we're doing. We're actively doing it. So, we're kind of past in the nicest possible way, we're kind of past the collecting feedback portion of it. Like, we know our options, and we know we've talked to a lot of people about what they want, but at the end of the day, we still have to figure out what we want to do. And we're doing that with regards to, things like whether we want to cover Hollow Knight. I think that we did talk about and, discuss that, like, it's probably not sustainable for us to just kind of do Souls-likes forever. At the rate they're coming out, we could probably keep the show going for a long time. But, as Kole alluded to, with this being, very difficult to kind of play through, and me giving up on my second time, I don't have the energy to just, play every Souls-like when it comes out and talk about it.
Right.
So the future of Bonfireside Chat will not be literally every Dark Souls inspired game.
Right.
It will be select ones, and we have to be choosy about what we want to talk about.
Gary, if you go to your Slack window, we have some people to thank.
Oh yeah, let me go to my Slack window.
Yeah.
Go ahead and get us started while I go to my Slack window.
Yeah, so people who give above a certain amount a month, they get thanked at the end of episodes. We are up to Brian Woodring. Thank you so much, Brian.
Brian, we really do appreciate it. Ken Ewan, Ken, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Jala
Prendes of The Level.
Yeah, absolutely. Jala is wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Jala. Bing Zhao, thank you very much, Bing.
You already made on a different show. You made the joke about search engines. Yeah.
Yes, well, you said that like I was definitely going to make the joke again, but I wasn't going to.
I just wanted to keep you. It was either tell you or drop a marker to cut it out
in case I didn't want to. Yeah. Or you can make the same joke twice.
Sure. Yeah.
We often do. The brother of Google Zhao. Here we go. There you go. I did it. I'm editing this one. It stays in. So.
And thank you so much to Brian Skirsha as well.
Absolutely.
And
thank
everybody who gives it. Patreon.com/Duckfeed.tv.
We're so rich in Brians, and they're all good.
We have so many good Brians.
Yeah, Brian's own.
Yeah.
So thank you guys very much. Thanks everybody who listened. We will see you next week as we plow through a bunch of areas in Salt and Sanctuary.
Yep. And until next time.
Yeah. What should they do?
Watch your sodium intake.
No, that's probably good advice.
Yeah. No, I'm not a doctor.
Watch your sanctuary intake.
And we all pray that we will have far more soon